Okay, so now we are recording. I will go ahead and get started. And for anyone who wants to, there is a workbook that is attached to this presentation meant to be gone through alongside the presentation, but there's also journal prompts that you can use for after. And if you go to my website, yournorthstarrising.com, and then click on offerings, you will see the workbook there. It's about 20 pages of extra journaling and space for writing what came through during this presentation. And it's priced at $5.99. So you can grab that if you want to. It's completely optional, though. You don't have to have that. Although I do recommend having a pen and paper handy because this is a functional workshop. So there will be opportunities to write down things that come to you. And then at the end, we will also have time for any questions or chats, anything that came up. So, nurturing through overwhelm. This is a workshop for stressed out moms. I think there's a lot of those in the world. This isn't something that I do as my day job per se, but on coaching calls and working with overwhelm, anxiety, and just general emotional activation or emotional shutdown, I did realize that a lot of my clients are moms, and this is a trigger point for a lot of people. It was the main trigger point for me, and it took coming out the other side of that and realizing one day, wow, like I feel really at peace with where I'm at. To realize that, hey, maybe I can help people navigate through at least partially to the other side. So this will be a free workshop. Like I said, the accompanying workbook is optional. You can purchase that, and we will get started. So I started with a common theme that I see popping up that I felt. It can feel really stressful to have strong emotions overtake you when you are supposed to be the calm in someone else's storm. And one thing that I actually said a lot of times was, I can barely be the calm in my own storm. So I believe this is one reason why mothering is a trigger point for those of us who we could call ourselves highly sensitive people. But sometimes we feel emotions really strongly. And so if those are feeling really big, sometimes they cause us to feel really small. And when we feel small, we feel like we can't really hold everything we want to. So this workshop is going to be simple. I didn't want it to be super complex, relatively quick. I would like to fit this within the hour so that it's bite-sized information that you can utilize on an ongoing level. But it will not be surface level information. So this is going to offer opportunities for you to be able to dive in deeper if you choose. My main goal in a lot of the things I do is to help with perspective shifting. I found that that was a big part of me finding peace amidst my chaos, is that I would absorb that chaos. And so the things that were happening around me, outside of me, to the people that I loved, I would absorb that and I would kind of take that in as my own. And so when I was able to shift the way that I was viewing things, that was when I started to feel that difference inside. So, what I will cover in this workshop, number one, who am I and why do I care? Who is this person you're listening to today? Then we will go into what's the problem. I think in a moment, we'll have a moment for you to put in the chat, what do you think in your words the problem is here? Because it is different when you hear it in other people's words. And sometimes we can see like, oh, that resonates. Oh, that gets me thinking. We'll go into some sacred truths that apply to motherhood, but they also apply to other areas as well. So hopefully you can use this in a broader perspective in your life. We'll do something called the mirror exercise, which again, you can use in other areas. Then I'll talk a little bit about the solution as I see it. So I'm not saying that this is the solution to your problems, but this is, what do I think is missing? You know, who am I? Why do I care? Well, why does it matter? How can I use this? And then, like I said, at the end, we'll have space for questions and discussion. Anything that came up for you, we can chat about that. So here's me. I'm Ashana. I have 5 kids of my own. They are 1, 4, 8, 11, and 12. And then in between those kiddos, kind of stair stepped, I gave birth to 3 surrogate children as well. So from the ages of 19 to 30, 31, I gave birth to 8 kids. And I tell you that because it feels important to me in my motherhood journey, because I've been through many layers of motherhood, like the new mom, the young mom, the mom of multiples, the mom of now, these surrogates or children. A lot of times I hear people say, how did you do that? How did you give those children away? And that's a level of my own healing that I have had to look into specifically because of my childhood and my perspective of how sacred motherhood is or isn't to me at that time, what it meant to me, the vessel that I was given that could be a mother. So I've been through a lot of different aspects of motherhood, and I feel like that's really helpful in understanding many perspectives. So I lived in foster care as a child. I was in a shelter home. I grew up in a quite abusive home. So I've also had a varied experience in childhood that, if I'm being blunt, it just gave me a lot of issues to sift through in becoming a mother, being the kind of mother I wanted to be, trying to be a calm mother, patience and guiding and all that stuff that bundles up into motherhood that was affected by my childhood. And so I had to learn different tactics to deal with different issues. And all of them revolved around emotional overwhelm. I experienced dysfunctional marriage. So for me, there was also the added experience of making my entire world, and my family's world, revolve around the dynamics of the relationship, the marriage, the mother and father, the unit, versus focusing on that nurturing aspect of being a mother and connecting with my children. And so this was a many layered process of stepping stones where I would work on one and then the next would become more clear. So not everyone is going to experience, these things that I've experienced, but this is my specific perspective on this. So, homeschool is another big trigger point for a lot of people. It was for me. I've had people ask how homeschooling went, having 5 kids at home, and I told them the first year was purely getting used to it and transitioning. The first year was chaotic and difficult, stressful. The second year, we kind of started to get our groove a little bit. And then by the third year, of course, amidst these years, I was also doing like my personal healing of my own emotional overwhelm. So by that third year, it was pretty smooth sailing, but we still faced some emotional outbursts from me and from my children. So that was another experience that really my kids were able to help guide me in what they needed. And then it also brought me closer to what I needed because of that trigger point of that added responsibility. Like, oh gosh, now I'm responsible for their education. Conscious parenting, I put that on here because I used to be very strict authoritarian. I spanked my kids. That did not align for me personally. It didn't feel good. It added to my guilt and my stress. I desired to be that conscious parent who did connect deeply with my children, because I saw how I grew up having an abusive home, and I didn't want anything to do with my parents when I left the house. I'm not saying that will apply to everyone's kids or this is how everyone is going to parent. This is just what was personal to me. Um, Most recently, I've been through custody cases regarding my children, obviously, coming on the heels of dysfunctional marriage, where there was a shift in energy of focusing on me and how I was wronged and what I had been through, and then shifting that focus towards really what is for the best for my kids. That was a big, like, growing up point for me. And I'll talk about those a little bit in this workshop of the growing up experience that you face in motherhood, because personally, I believe that every mother comes to that at a different point in time. And it's just personal to you. So I had a really bad fear of authority that came from my childhood that was worsened in the court system by those custody cases. And that led me on it seemed like a never ending quest for inner peace. But once I experienced these perspective shifts, I realized that the peace kind of settled into place more easily. And I became my own authority, and I stopped fearing what other people were going to do or think about me. So that's me. That's a little bit of why I am doing this, because it was such a powerful experience for me to start out in complete, utter emotional overwhelm, crying on the kitchen floor, not knowing how to be a mom, feeling like no one had given me an example to follow, to now I feel at peace with my relationship with my children. They come to me and want to tell me their feelings and want to hear my opinions, which to me is a really big deal, because I remember I didn't really care what my parents' opinions were of me or of anything else. So hopefully that can give you a little bit, I guess, reassurance that you're not alone if you find yourself triggered or emotional in situations. And my hope is that we all come to a place where we have those experiences, we own them, we learn from them, we become okay with them, and then we can feel safer for our children. So when they see what we've been through, my hope is that we can raise individuals who we've given them something to look up to. That was important to me. So, issues that are often faced in stressed out motherhood. I'll mention these four, but just know that this is not totality of what we do face in motherhood. So number one for me was being defensive and having harsh words. I would constantly go to sleep feeling bad about the way I had spoken to my partner or my children, or sometimes even myself. I talked about how you give, and you're making sure that life is better for everyone and you're taking care of everyone around you, but then no one is really ever happy. And then sometimes they even come back and say, hey, you didn't do good enough. Hey, I need more. Hey, why did you do it like this? And that tied into that fear of authority for me, because when my children questioned me, it really triggered me. And I learned that that was because my parents questioned me all the time. So I really started noticing, um, as I was going to sleep, I was like, gosh, I got really triggered by that. And it made me super defensive. So then we have overstimulation, and I put a lack of connection here, because you're being everything for everyone. You're holding all their shit. You're letting them climb on you. You're answering their questions. You're trying to remember the thing in the back of your mind that needed to happen 5 minutes ago. You walk into a room, you forget why you're in there, then something happens in another room. There's a lot of things that you're juggling at any point in motherhood. And personally, I feel like when your brain is so full of all of these things that need to be taken care of, it gives you like this disconnect from your sense of self, because it's difficult to be present in yourself and in that moment and in your experience when everything is constantly shifting around you and you're having to know where all of those shifting parts are. So, this awareness of outside causes you to have less awareness of inside. And then, of course, that leads to a lack of connection with the ones you love. And that sucks, because then you're defensive again or you shut down, which brings us to the helplessness and total shutdown. So I put here, I'm going to take a guess and say that motherhood isn't always feeling like quite what you signed up for, because there's more things you don't know the answer to than things that you do. That was really, really profound for me, that my kids, in that moment of overstimulation, inevitably, one of them would question me or question something or ask me something, and I would just be like, I don't know. I literally don't know. Like, I can't answer you. Another child would come up and be like, Mom, there's no food. I'm hungry. We need a snack. I don't even have the emotional wherewithal to go look in the pantry for you right now. Or another kid would be like, I need you to pay this for school. And I would just stand there and just feel unable to do anything. And hopefully you're seeing that all of these kind of tie into one another, because then we have that overstimulation, and then I get defensive, and then I start snapping. So it really is a snowball cumulative effect. And I think that's why, motherhood is a trigger point for so many people, is because we have that responsibility on us, and it's difficult to just pause and figure out what you need in that moment. So hopefully by the end of this, we'll be able to work on that together. But we have to let go of this last one, the shame and guilt, because it is a vicious cycle. And I put here, what's the best way to keep feeling like you're not doing enough? Probably going to bed each night feeling like you didn't do enough. So yes, this is going to be an active workshop. Yes, this stuff can help you in the future. You can continue to journal about it, think about it, jot it down. You can hit me up if you need to chat anything through. But at the end of the day, the inner part that's on you is going to be validating your worthiness as a person and realizing, okay, I'm doing what I can with what I have. And then you just kind of have to keep going. I mean, that's the reality of motherhood. So a big part ties into my why here of you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. So we're going to dig in a little deeper. Oh, real quick. I'm going to leave this slide up. If you could, if you want to, if you could pop in the chat any issues you face when you're stressed out in motherhood that I didn't cover here. So if anything comes to mind, because it could help me in the future when I'm going over this workshop again, because I plan to add to this and help more if I can. I really want to tailor this to what people need. So you don't have to go into detail, just if there's anything that stands out to you, feel free to jot that in the chat. And I put a little quote here. When we get stuck in the cycle of not enough, we start to view everything through that lens. Unfortunately, even our children and our role as a mother. And that can be kind of a guilt-ridden statement. So I'm going to just let this kind of sit and be what it is and remind you, like, it's okay to admit to some of these things, because that not enough feeling, it's not a part of you that's saying like, hey, you're not enough. That's not what we're saying. What it's really saying to us is, I feel like I'm not enough. And so we've got to start shifting that lens, or shifting our perspective to realize that we're viewing it through a lens of I'm not enough. And so you're not being a mean mom, you're not an awful person. It's just that everything has become a potential catalyst for overwhelm because of the lens that we've been viewing everything through. So just a reminder here, I know that is a heavy statement, but no guilt, no shame, always growth and moving forward when we can. So I have a few examples here. And I just put, you have the infant stage, the toddler stage, the school age stage, and then the teenage stage. These may not all apply to you, but for instance, in infancy, we have this new baby. We may or may not know what we're doing. We may or may not know how we want to do things, but we have, is your child on the growth curve? Are they following the proper social cues by the proper age? Did you breastfeed? Did you bottle feed? Again, there's always things that may or may not apply here, but hey, did you have any trauma in birth, in the labor process? A lot of moms have that. What kind of sleep schedule is your baby on? Make sure you sleep when baby sleeps, but you also have a messy house or other kids to take care of, or work. How many diapers a day? Is your baby now teething? Don't give them this, give them this. Your baby's constipated. What are you going to give them? So at the bottom, I put lack of self-care. I feel like that's one that we all can relate to. We're moving into the toddler stage. We still have their social skills. We're helping form those. Now they're sharing, they're snatching. We have the do as I say, not as I do, because if you start to get defensive or critical, you may kind of be snappy, or you may snatch something out of their hand and then tell them don't snatch. We're struggling sometimes, if we're being honest. Safety, hygiene, nutrition, they mimic what they see, they ask questions you can't answer, and now they're forming views of the world which are actually informed by our views of the world. So that's a lot of pressure on us. What are we teaching them? They move into school age, and now they're looking at approval and acceptance, and it's not always from us. Sometimes it's from their friends. They have this new access to technology. They're conceptualizing what authority means. They're learning things from their friends. They come home and it might be totally off the wall and unhealthy. They're being taught a hierarchy in school. They may not have cultivation of their interests and passion, depending on what they're passionate in. That's a pressure on us too. We want to make sure that they're healthy all around. Nutrition, hygiene, we want to have connection and presence. We're teaching them how to have priorities, but how are we handling our priorities? What if they have extracurriculars? Then we move into teenage, and of course, there's more technology, but now we're teaching them safety in the world because they're going out on their own. Interpersonal boundaries. Well, do we have those? How do we teach those to them? They're still learning from their friends, but now it's more things that we probably need to teach them more about. Nutrition, hygiene, physical activity. They're exploring sexuality, gender roles. What did we learn about gender roles? What are we helping inform their views of the world with? It's a lot. So if you can think of anything else, feel free to jot it in the chat. And again, in the workbook, there's also space there for you to write those down if they're a little more personal to you. But this is kind of just a place where we can take a deep breath together and say, oh my gosh, this is a lot. So I want to validate that for you. Like, this is a lot. We juggle so many things at any given moment, and this is just one little category of it. So don't forget that. We also don't want to use this as an opportunity to be more overwhelmed and more stressed. So if it feels good right now, I invite you to just take a deep breath, sit up straight if you're sitting, square your legs and feel your hips, and just breathe a deep breath into your hips and just ground yourself wherever you are. And then breathe all of this out because we can set it down for a minute, at least while we're here together. So, my take on the actual problem, this is where it ties into what I do in coaching. Everything on the outside is feeling really difficult and hard to handle because there's still so much happening on the inside. The child self is still seeking to have their needs met. That's inside of you. But you, as an adult, are often unaware of this internal struggle. And so we only notice the disempowering effects of not being able to soothe ourselves. So those big feelings that are coming out and the swirling and the chaos, we're not really able to ground ourselves and soothe ourselves the way we ideally want to, but we're not really aware of like what exactly is going on the inside. And so that informs the world outside of us. Everything becomes chaotic. Everything becomes overwhelming. That's my take. So here we have the vicious cycle of overwhelm. If you look at the top, you're meeting everyone's needs. It never feels like it's good enough. Don't forget you have needs too. So then you constantly feel depleted. You're pouring from an empty cup, short on patience. Nothing is fun. Nothing is joyful anymore. You lose your temper. You feel distant. You don't really feel like you have much help or support. It's difficult to feel like anyone understands you sometimes. Maybe you're not even validated in your struggle. Well, then you feel bad because, like, shouldn't I just be grateful for what I have? Shouldn't I just be able to control my emotions? So that feeds that shame monster. And then in parenting, often you'll see that your kids forgive you, they reassure you. Now, sometimes they go to their room and they slam the door and they're over it or they want nothing to do with you, but they come back and you'll see that at the root of it all, your kids still love you because you're still their mom. So then you realize, okay, yes, like I have a job to do. I'm here. I'm doing it. I'm going to be better tomorrow. And then you wake up and a lot of times it starts over. Again, this is personal for my experience and the words that came to me, but I want you to just take a moment to think about what your cycle of overwhelm looks like. And if it feels right after the call, you can go back and rewatch this. You could even jot down, like, what are the big defining moments of your cycle? Like, do you feel shame? Do you feel like a failure? What's your biggest struggle in motherhood? Is it not having the support you need? And you can kind of pinpoint what your cycle looks like because we're going to try to find that one spot on the cycle that we can kind of kick you off that trajectory. And once you're off the trajectory, it becomes easier to rewire a new pattern, a new path that you can walk in motherhood. So we see it as our job to make sure that our kids grow up to be decent humans. That's a big, big job. That's a lot. That's a heavy burden to carry. Don't forget there's other people involved too. There's another parent, there's the outside world, there's the government, there's our culture, there's school if your kids are in school. So that's not all on us, but we feel like it's all on us. And truly, at the root of motherhood, it is on us because we're forming their sense of safety in the world. So we have to look at, what did we learn about being a decent human from our own families? And that's a big one. Like, you have to go back to, but what does that mean to me and why? Why does it mean that? Is that an actual value I have? So, in breaking that down, we're going to look at the sacred truths of motherhood. And if you got the workbook to accompany this, you'll see that there's pages on each of these for you to kind of journal further. We're just going to do like the broad overview of these because we only have an hour. But sacred truth number one, this is the most important work that you will ever do in your life. You have your own personal healing and getting closer to your inner child connection. But if you are a mother, that's the most sacred thing you can do. Nothing else can come close. And I want to say here that for much of my motherhood journey, I didn't feel that. So, you hear these moms say, like, I had my kids and my entire perspective changed and my life started over from the moment I looked into their eyes. I just want to say that personally didn't happen for me. It took a lot more, I guess you could say, work on my part of a healing journey to get to that point. So, if it doesn't feel like that in the moment, I want to say that's okay. So, I also put here, it's okay to give yourself fully to that work, even your tightly harnessed emotions. So if you feel grief when I say that, if you feel that motherhood is bittersweet, if you feel utter joy, if you feel like you just want to collapse in a heap laughing and maybe tears are coming down your face, that is the work. That is what motherhood does. Motherhood cracks you open and opens you to your own vulnerabilities, a lot of times the ones that you weren't able to get to until you reached this point of motherhood. So I want to encourage you that whatever you do feel and whatever you do need, feel that and you can embrace it, because that's the job. That's what it is. And a lot of times we can look to our kids to learn how to do that because they're over here jumping in mud puddles while we're trying to get shit done. So they're a good example sometimes. Okay, sacred truth number two, the feminine is actually meant to be supported by the masculine, not the other way around. So, what I mean by that is, way back when we had cultures that were very feminine based, we had like the goddess culture where the female was revered as creating life. And then from that, birthed everyone. But at some point, that was distorted and it became more of a God culture versus a goddess culture. And I'm not bringing this to religion here, but just to say that at that point, women were vilified. So now we have stories of women like Pandora opening the box and everything went to shit. Or, they say Eve ate the fruit and everything was awful after that. So just keeping in mind these themes that play out in our culture and the fact that women birth life and we're doing this hard work and we have all of those things that we're juggling. Sacred truth from the way I'm bringing this here. If this doesn't resonate with you, then perhaps we may not resonate, but here's how I see it. Feminine is meant to be supported by the masculine, not the other way around. So, what that means is you are not here to raise your partners. You're not here to be their mother. You are here to lead and guide and be in charge of your own life and be fully in your experience. And that means also raising your children and being a safe, regulated place for your children. And that means that you need to have a steadfast support to rely on so that you can give yourself fully to your work. So if you're going to experience all of those big emotions, I'm sorry, but that's likely not going to happen if you're busy managing someone else's emotions. So a lot of times we see women seeking this partner who can take care of us. And a lot of times, I'm not saying always, but we find ourselves in relationships where it's the other way around. And I just want to say, if you have ever experienced that or you're in that now, that's a lot. That's draining a lot of energy from you. And I want to really validate that because that means that you're trying to do even more things. So you don't have that support you need. Never forget that. And some people do. I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but sacred truths here as I see it. Number three, life is not coming at you, it's coming from you. What I mean by that is All of these things are not just happenstance that you are victim to, they are informed by your inner state. So we know that as mothers, we have tiny people looking up to us. They're looking at us to, should I be afraid of this? They fall and they look at you, and people say, "Oh gosh, don't. They're going to cry." Well, they're looking at you to see, like, hey, am I in pain right now? Like, is mom watching me? Is she noticing that I'm in pain? Oh gosh, now I'm in pain. They're looking to us for comfort in that moment, but they're also looking to learn context in everything that happens in their world. This is powerful because it means that you could choose to fill their world with positivity and compassion. And again, when we have all those plates in the air and it's chaos, and our lens is, I'm not enough to handle all of this, that's how we're informing their world, with that reality of, I'm not enough to handle all of this. So a lot of times kids can internalize that of, I'm too much, or the world is scary. You see how the cycle continues. So we're going to, again, in that workbook, there's space to dig into this one deeper. And we do have another slide on this one because it's very important. And the last one being that children are teachers. So I put here, we can learn much more from them than they can learn from us. So we show them with our actions how to regulate emotions and how to interact socially and how to be the calm in the storm, per se. But children at their most raw form are still very closely in touch with how to be authentic, how to be themselves. They don't give a shit. A lot of times they do things that are embarrassing to us, and they don't care because they're being themselves. And they show unconditional love. We could snap at them, we could rage at them. They still love us unconditionally. And they're often so in touch with their creativity. And, those masterpieces on the wall, that's creative. And a lot of us, I don't know about you, but I've actually said before, oh, I'm not a painter. Oh, I'm not creative. So when we look to children as an example of these traits, we can see that a lot of times what they're showing is what we're lacking if we look close enough and be humble. And we'll get a little bit more into that one too. So that sacred truth, number one, the most important work. So we know this, we can say it, but sometimes we're a little emotionally removed from it. And I want to point out that this can be to protect the younger parts of ourselves who didn't feel like we were made to be the most important as a child. That's very, very important. Like, as children, if we didn't learn that we were the most important work, then we're going to grow up and become mothers who don't realize that motherhood is the most important work. So we have a question here. Did your mother's energy, and this is, this could be stepmom, this could be foster mom, adoptive mom, did it show you that being there for you was her most important work? And that's a journal prompt that you can come back to later. And if you didn't have a mother, if your mother passed away, then there's a hole there, there's a void. So, depending on what age your mother was gone at a young age, we could even say, like, gosh, I wasn't even important enough for her to stay. This is going to be very individual. So I'm just going to leave the question and let it be what it is. And always know you can come back to this. And again, in the workbook, there's further introspective prompts on this. But I want to say that distracting from anxiety is a technique that people often say you should do. Like, clean the house. If you start to get anxious, just find something to distract yourself from it. Yes, that can work. But sometimes we will find ourselves filling our life up with tasks and distractions and things to do. And then we're living for that next moment to get through, which is actually like ingraining into us that pattern that cycle that we've been in. And so then we experience burnout, and then we can experience resentment for other people who need us. And so instead of like stopping our emotions and covering over them and then being in that cycle, we can actually redirect the flow. So when we start to feel that way, we can tune into our body and say, okay, like, what do I feel like I can do right now that might move some of this energy? And sometimes it can be crying. Sometimes it can be shaking your body really hard. Sometimes it can just be taking a deep breath. Sometimes it's taking a nap. I've found that I can pick my smallest child up and start dancing with her. My favorite way, as I go throughout my day, I sing songs that are narrating what I'm doing or what I'm experiencing. So like for a minute, my phrase was, I'm annoyed, because I would feel annoyed in that moment. And then I was like validating that annoyance, like, I'm annoyed, I'm annoyed. So now I've learned that I can actually sing my way through that. And my 4-year-old watches me and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a situation that I can feel so annoyed in right now. But you know what? I can do this instead. And now I'm going to do this. And I'm like moving that energy through with the action of using my voice. And I'm also showing him, now I'm not standing in place and tensing up around it and then taking it out on someone. And if he chooses to use that tactic, cool. But he sees that mom's not helpless. Mom can handle the situation. So he feels safer with me. And then he also learns, like, oh, there's always something we can do in a situation. So that's just a specific example to me. If anything else pops up for you, feel free to put it in the chat, because I do want this to be open. And if there's something you found that works for you, by all means, please share it. But I put, let the feelings be what they are. Then you can step in with the redirected thoughts. So, like, we want to feel that, like, gosh, I'm annoyed right now. And I had a long time of sitting with that annoyance and just being, I'm annoyed. But now I've realized that I can be annoyed and I feel that annoyance. And then I'm like, oh, okay, but actually I can do this. And I work through it and I debunk that annoyance. Like, oh, that's just because I feel helpless. I can actually do something, da 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 da. Some emotions take me a little bit longer. Like, if I'm sad, I'm not going to be like, I'm sad, but that's okay. Now I'm going to go do something anyway. No, I'll be like, gosh, I'm really sad right now. Like, let me sit in the floor and just breathe this out. So again, it's personal, but it also depends on the emotion. So just a reminder here, though, like, the emotions are not the problem. They're not something that we want to run away from. They're something that we actually want to go towards, because they're showing us something. And stepping in with that gratitude and positivity can be enormously helpful in this. Like, I'm so grateful that I can take a deep breath and make it through this. Real life application of this, assigning value to motherhood and to people. So this is something that we do a lot of times habitually as humans. So let's say I go into a coffee shop and I'm on my computer and I'm getting my work done, and I go in there all the time, and I always get a coffee and I use their Wi-Fi and I sit for an hour or two, and like, I'm a regular, they know me there. There is a huge typo on this screen. I could buy a coffee every other day, but today I don't have value for them because I'm not giving them my money. So let's say I come in one day and I don't buy a coffee, but I sit and use their Wi-Fi. So this person comes up to me and they're like, sorry, you have to make a purchase or you have to leave today. That's my choice in that moment. Like, okay, here, I'm going to buy a coffee, or maybe I was planning on getting one in an hour and I'm just not ready for a coffee yet. But it feels like, to me in that moment, now they have the right to do what they want. But again, I'm looking at my feelings here. I feel like I don't have as much value to them as a customer because I'm sitting here and I'm not giving them my money today. Now, this could be a residual, lingering feeling from my childhood. I feel like I don't have value today because mom keeps snapping at me. I feel like I don't have value today because mom just hasn't paid attention to me and she's been on her phone all day. So, again, this is personal to you and your children. But another journal prompt: do you think your kids feel like they hold the same value for you every day, even when they don't perform well or meet your expectations? So again, that coffee shop, they had every right to tell me, hey, you need to buy a coffee to sit here. That's their rules for their coffee shop. But looking at my feelings in that moment, I felt like I didn't have as much value because I wasn't paying. So we're looking at how our kids feel, because that's their perspective of us as a mother. And we want to start tuning into that, because that's how that connection forms, is through like true deep compassion and empathy. And this doesn't mean that we're going to shame ourselves if it's a yes or a no. We're just looking at it. We're being curious. Some emotions may come up with this, and that's okay. I really encourage you to look back at this later. Like I said, we only have limited time today. So, okay, so support from the masculine. At our core, we desire to feel safe. So, looking at this, logically, we often didn't feel truly protected and validated by our fathers. Now, that's not always, but often. So now we may seek that out in relationships. But a lot of times, the men that we find ourselves coupling with, having relationships with, meeting up with, they have their own wounding. They have their own mother and father wound. A lot of times they may not be able to provide that for us, but we can't fix that cycle by mothering them. And so mending our relationship with our mother energy, that's supposed to say feminine energy, my goodness. Mother feminine energy will be what allows our authentic vulnerability to flow and bloom. So when we get in touch with that femininity, that flow, that emotional flow, over here I may be really upset, and over here I may be really blissful, and over here I may be really sad. Once we get in touch with that and become more comfortable with that, our energy will be flowing more freely. And that actually helps us to be like not tensed up in our energy field. It actually allows our energy field to open up and invite, number one, as a mother, invite our children to feel more vulnerable with us. But also, it may invite aligned masculine energy into your life who can hold space for that. So it starts with mending that feminine flow. So, just some questions here. How do you feel about other women and their mothering? Do you feel comparison between yourself and them? Do you feel better than them? Do you feel less than them? And this could be too, like, do you ever find yourself like kind of gossiping in your mind about what other women are doing with their children? This could be like a key indicator that there's some mother issue coming up there. And tying this back into the masculine, did your father ever make comments about other women? That's an important one that you can dig into, because we're looking at the flow of energy here and what masculine and feminine mean for you and what the dynamic between the two has been as an experience in your life. And then you can also look at, if he did make comments about other women, how did your mother respond to that? What did she teach you was okay? And in the workbook, there's another page with several more questions on this to dig into that feminine and masculine role. Okay, that sacred truth that life is coming from you, not at you. So you've heard, where attention goes, energy flows. That's very true. What you pay attention to, what you fixate on, often manifests, often shows up in other ways. Now I drive a white Honda. Well, guess what? I see Hondas everywhere, and I see white Hondas everywhere now too, because I wanted that. I manifested that, and now I see more of them. So we're going to take a look at how many years of your life have you lived with the belief that certain things are difficult, certain aspects of your life are just a struggle. And then you can take a look at how those beliefs formed. Was there a specific moment that cemented for you? Or was it just a running theme at the core of your life? Was it something that you picked up from someone else? Someone maybe who raised you, you saw their view of life and you learned to be that way. Or was there one big event that formed that for you, and now the cycles continue that? Reaffirm it. So, does the belief that something is difficult cause the situation to look more tolerable or more trying? So, if you believe that something is difficult, if you believe that something is a struggle, does that cause you to look at it and be like, yeah, I can totally handle that? Or does it cause you to be like, oh my gosh, like sometimes I wonder why I even bother? And this doesn't have to be just motherhood, but this also can apply to motherhood. We're learning to shift our perspective here. So I invite you to look back over the difficult parts of your life, the things that you've been like, gosh, this is a struggle that really sucked. And I want you to jot them down. It doesn't have to be right now. Come back to this if it feels good. And think about what positive lessons they brought you, or what good traits about yourself that you realized because of those situations. So we're reframing things to shift into a more empowered point of view. And what we're looking at here is like, how can we be grateful for these lessons? Because anxiety and gratitude cannot exist at the same time, because they use the same part of the brain to function. So if you are expressing gratitude, it immediately halts anxiety. So that's another tactic you can use in the overwhelm, is to find something to be grateful for and really feel it and mean it and feel what that feels like in your body. Feel the gratitude, because we're not wired to support those two opposites at the same time. We can't do it. Come on. Okay. Last sacred truth: children are teachers. This one is at the core of everything. I actually learned this from my teacher and guru, Leanna Shanti. She has the core wound healing programs called Healing from Mother Wound, Healing from Father Wound, and Healing from Narcissistic Relationships. They completely changed my life. And in those, she talks about the four roles in parenting. And those are to nurture your children, to protect your children, to empower your children, and to initiate your children. And these kind of go in order. We start with nurturing, obviously, when they're a baby, and then we protect them. And then as they get older, we empower them. And then as they're going into adulthood, we initiate them out into the world. Now, this looks different from mother than it does from father, but mother and father are both meant to provide all four roles. Children are wired to expect these from birth. So they're birthed into the world in a state of love and experience and just full using their five senses and having their emotions about it. And like, wow, here I am, world. This is me. And they expect that these people who birthed them are going to nurture them, are going to protect them, are going to empower them, and are going to initiate them. And a lot of times that means holding space for them, holding space for their emotions. So when children express healthy entitlement, like they know that mom is a safe place to have a meltdown. They know that mom is a safe place to let me get my feelings out and tell you how I really feel because you're going to love me no matter what, because you're empowering me to be my own person. These are actually a sign of emotional safety. And studies have shown that healthy entitlement is a key indicator of resilience later in life. So, adults who are able to be flexible, adaptable, overcome adversity, studies like psychological and scientific studies have found that that is often bred from healthy entitlement as a child because these roles were met. So, personal proof here, when you feel like you've been let down by someone, a lot of times that means that your expectations were not met by them. And so you don't feel important to them. And so if we look at that from children, a lot of times if they express that they're feeling let down by us in parenting, again, going back to that defensiveness and we use our harsh words, it just means that their expectations weren't met, which means at the root of it, they don't feel important to us because we're not focused on their needs in the moment. We can't because we're in a state of emotional charge. So this is looking at it in terms of you've got to be gentle on yourself. You're not a failure of a parent. You got to be easy with yourself, just like you would be ideally with your children if you're going to be that kind of parent you want to be. You know, a lot of times we didn't get those four roles. So we can look to our children to help teach us how to meet those four roles. If they're showing us they're upset about something, we can go back to these and say, okay, what need do they have right now that I'm not meeting? And that's not to say that like we're going to give them candy all the time or we're going to, I don't know, people say like you're going to raise spoiled kids and you're giving them everything they want. It's not that. Like take a look at their emotions, take a look at their perspective of the situation. And then you can also look too at like, am I triggered in this situation because my expectations are not being met because I don't feel important? It always mirrors back to us. They're teaching us to see in ourselves what we can work on in ourselves and then be that and model that for them. And a note here, children are never out to get us or trying to take advantage of us. They are simply learning social cues and exploring the edges of self and other. So they're not trying to manipulate and be conniving, which is what I grew up hearing about myself. And that caused me to act out because I believe that about myself. No, I was actually trying to see like, does this person actually love me? Or like, hey, is this a socially acceptable thing to do? And parents are meant to be the safe place for them to be able to do that. And they actually learn boundaries from us. So there's healthy ways to express our boundaries to teach them this is a healthy way to express a boundary because it's okay to have those with your children and it's what works for you and your family. So just a reminder here to be gentle on yourself and you can go back to these four roles in hard moments. Okay, quick story. Gosh, I need to hurry. Okay, how my 3-year-old taught me abundance with toilet paper. Children are teachers. My kid was in there using a butt ton of toilet paper and I was like, hey, dude, you shouldn't use so much toilet paper. That's a lot. And he's like, okay, but you can just what did he say? Why shouldn't I use so much? And I'm like, oh, because we're going to run out of toilet paper and then we won't have any more. And then he goes, well, then I can just use a baby wipe. And that stopped me in my tracks because number one, he questioned authority, first of all. Not that I'm saying I'm an authority over him, but in that moment, I was exerting what felt like authority. Hey, no, stop, don't. Don't use so much toilet paper. What did he immediately do? Why? Why should I not use so much toilet paper? I love that he did that because that's something that I've been learning to do myself after that fear of authority. So then I have an answer that makes sense. Well, because we're going to run out. And then his response is, I can just adapt and overcome. I can just use something else. And I'm like, oh, wow, he's right. Like, I don't want to teach him to be in a poverty mindset of just, no, don't do that. So he actually taught me in that moment of like, question everything, think on your toes. This makes sense. And also relax a little bit because it's toilet paper. And then actually a week later, my oldest daughter made my youngest daughter into a mummy with a roll of toilet paper. And a year ago, that would have, well, maybe 2 years ago, that would have triggered me. But now it's a really awesome photo and a memory that I'll have forever. And it was hilarious. And they did that on their own with their creativity. And it was fun. And they weren't on technology and they weren't fighting. And it was beautiful. So, just an example of how children can be teachers. Okay, I'm going to try to hurry. Real life application. Think about your customer service voice when you go and you talk to people in town. You talk to people differently. You're kinder to them, you're more personable to them. And I put, do you show up with the same energy inside your home toward your children as you do toward other people in public? This is just something to look at. Which one of those in your home with your children or out around people, which one seems to excite you more and bring renewed energy and kindness? And then I want you to look at that with curiosity and realize what needs of mine are being met in that situation. This is not a reason to guilt yourself. And, it could be that you show up better for your children, and that's super, super awesome. But if not, just think, what needs do I have that aren't being met? Because that's what's showing through here. Whose opinions matter to me? And what do their opinions mean when I judge my worth and my acceptance? That can start leading me towards what I value and what needs need to be met. Do I need validation? Okay, validate myself. So I learned as a kid that you should be seen and not heard. And so as a mother for a long time, my crankiest self was at home. And my kids still loved me every day. So I'm grateful that they were patient for me as I learned these things, especially about myself. Okay, the mirror exercise. When you're triggered in a moment, you're upset with your kids about something or anyone, ask yourself these questions. What if my perception is false? What if what I'm believing about the situation is just completely not true? What if I have just concocted a reality here that's not at the root of it at all? Because a lot of times you'll find that kids have a totally different explanation of why they did something than what we thought the explanation would be. So by doing this, we're challenging our brains to get curious, get creative. And then also, if I were wrong, what would I learn about myself? For me, I jumped to conclusions and I needed to be more flexible. I was being very no, no, no. And a lot of times my kids needed more yeses. Second question, how do I do this exact thing to other people? So, whatever I perceive that my children or this person is doing to me right now, and if it is true, and if I have the right idea about this situation, how have I done that to someone else? Or how do I do that to someone else now? Or how do I not want to do this in the future? We're always learning from this. And then the last question in the mirror exercise, look at what this person did. You're upset about it. You're triggered by it. Look at it and say, how do I do this exact thing to myself? Like, is this a theme that I see popping up in my life that I actually put myself into these situations? Or I talk to myself this way, or I treat myself this way, and they're mirroring that back to me? So, this is just a little way to start shifting the way you think about things to kind of stop that trigger in its tracks and get curious. I put presence is the solution to regret. We wake up in the morning and we regret things. We feel like shit because of how we treated people. So, one way to help with that is to wake up and meet your kids fresh every single day. because they grew overnight. They created more of their trillions of cells overnight. They could be a totally new person today. So meet them each day. Who are you? Hi, how are you? How do you feel? What do you enjoy? What do you feel like doing today? Because a lot of times we can project our lens onto them. And it can be easy to forget that they are having their own unique experience of life. And my place is to foster a place of safety for them, acceptance for them. A big wake up call for me was when I didn't want to play with my kids and they wanted me to play with them, which thank God they did. Like what a blessing that my kids want me to play with them and they don't think I'm lame. And I didn't want to play. And a very good friend of mine, she told me, I said, what do I do? Like, God, I'm fed up with this. What do I do? And she was like, you get in the floor and you play with them because that's what they're telling you they need. And you didn't have anyone to do that with you. So now you resent it, but you go do that. And it helped me. I mean, it was tough love for me. And I'm not saying that applies to all of you, but that's what I needed to hear in that moment. And it helped me a lot. And I'm really grateful that she said that. So, my take on the solution, as you've seen through a lot of this, I think that when you are in this situation feeling triggered, overwhelmed, shut down, etc., we look objectively at the present situation. Objectively, we take our emotions out of it for just a second and say, okay, this is happening right now. And it's okay that I feel the way I do because of what I've been through in my past. And I realize that my emotions are guiding me to see what my needs are that weren't met, to see where I'm not feeling empowered, to see how I still feel helpless or I'm in this cycle. And now I can say, okay, I forgive myself for whatever shame, guilt, feeling this way, etc. And now I need to meet this need in the moment. And then I can go journal about it, or I can get some movement out, or I can sing my way through it. And I'm going to focus on that connection with my kids. Even if I bit their head off, even if I was like, nah, 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 and I hurt their feelings, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, hey, honey, listen, that's not how I wanted to act. Okay. Like that wasn't okay. That doesn't feel good to me. I don't know if that felt good to you, but it didn't feel good to me. And this is how I want to handle that in the future. If that's how you choose to talk to your kids, that's how I do personally. I'm not telling you you should do that. But we can model that compassion for them and show them, like, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. And then we work in little steps to change that. That's not to say it's going to fix overnight. It took me, oh gosh, 2 or 3 years to feel like I could handle these triggering situations. So it's a process. So you have your 3 steps. Number one is that belief on the bottom there. I believe that change is possible for me. We're not going to keep saying, I'm lazy. I'm a piece of shit. I'm an awful mom. My anxiety won't let me do this. This is a struggle. I don't know what to do. We're going to shift that belief and have that self awareness of, hey, you learned it from someone. Gosh, like the way that you treat people, you learned from someone how to treat people that way. And that's not your identity. That's not who you are. It's okay that you feel this way, but it's not really okay to act that way. So we're going to validate how we feel about it. And then we can start to have that feeling of, I feel like a person who deserves peace and who deserves better. And that requires self compassion. And it takes time and it takes repetition. And you're probably going to do it again, at least to some degree. And we're going to wake up every day and we're going to forgive ourselves and not have the guilt and shame and say, hey, I feel like I can do better than this. And I know that I deserve to do better than this. And so do my kids. So let's go. We're going to take that action that's aligned with values and priorities. And this is where that self validation comes in. You've got to be able to parent yourself on this and say, hey, this is an okay thing to value. This is an okay thing to put priority on. These needs are okay to have. And also, you're awesome. You don't need anyone else to tell you that. You're a good mom. You don't need to look like another mom over here to tell you that because your kids are showing you exactly what kind of mom they need you to be. We can look to them as teachers. We can talk to them. Number one best thing you can do in motherhood, in my personal opinion, is to just ask your kids, what can I do for you? What do you need? What do you need from me? How are you feeling? How can I help you with that? And if we can get curious and ask questions, then these 3 steps become a lot easier because we see that they give grace and so can we. So I'm not going to talk too much about this. This is just an outline of my actual coaching in my 12-week program. We have those 3 steps. The red is the belief, the purple is the feeling, the green is the action. These are the specific steps we go through in that 12-week program. If you want, you can get in touch with me, Ashana at yournorthstarrising.com. But I'm running out of time, so I'm going to come to this next slide. And we're going to remember that we start over here on the purple with our worthiness. You've got to remember that you are worthy of all of your wildest hopes and dreams, not just despite what you're feeling right now, not just in spite of your struggles in motherhood, but because of what you're feeling right now. Like your emotions are the key. They are showing you what your unique experience is guiding you towards so that you can have that magic that is you. That's who your children were birthed to, not by accident. There's there's a reason to all of this, and it starts with believing that you are worthy of finding that reason. Then that allows for curiosity. We're going to get curious in the moment. How can I be objective with this? It's going to start with curiosity. Like, what is actually happening here? And that leads to that's how I'm objective with it, because I had to stop interjecting with my shame and with my guilt and, oh my gosh, my judgment of myself. I'm curious with it. And now, oh, okay, I'm stepped back from the situation a little bit. What is actually happening here? I wonder why this is. And then when we look at it with that objectivity, we come in with the honesty. We come in with that, okay, I can see that this need is not being met here. And this is what I need. And this is what they need. And this is the actual truth of the situation. This has been informed by past experiences, past emotions. We can make it through this together. We have to step in with that authenticity, which is the vulnerability. Your authentic feelings come through. Your authentic values come through. Do you truly value connection? Do you value freedom? Do you value peace in your life? Your authentic emotions are what show you what you value. You just have to step away from them and stop being afraid of them and say, okay, these are showing me a need that I have. And that will align you with your values. And once you become aligned with those actual values and you've gotten rid of the shame, you've gotten rid of the guilt, you've gotten curious, you've allowed your children to state how they feel, then you can step in with that intention, that intentional action of like, what are we going to do in this moment? What is going to be the best thing that suits my family's needs and what my values are and what my family's values are? So we're working on ourselves internally, and then we're taking that intentional action to forge that connection with others. So we work on this more in my program, but this is just like an introductory here. A question for later. And this one is a good one for you to look back on. What is the purpose of a mother to you? This was deep for me. What kind of example were you given to follow as what a mother means in life? What's the point? What's the point of having a mom? That's something I asked myself. What's the point of me even being here? Well, what was the point of my mom even being there? What did she show me she felt the point was? Very introspective question. Okay, I'm sorry. I know I went a little bit over time. A few more journal prompts because I love to give opportunities to kind of shift things. And like I said, in the workbook, there's space to write about these, and there's also a few more, well, a lot more. My why in mothering. So, what is my core role as a mother? And you can do this for each of your children if you have more than one. So, like my take on what this child needs as a mother, that's my core role. And so then what isn't my core role for this child? What is not going to bring us to that place of connection? And always bringing that back to like what you value. And then you can also ask the child, if they're old enough, what they value. And then personally to you also, just as a mother in general, like what do I feel my role is as a mother? You can look at what kind of things make me feel alive in mothering. What are the moments I live for? Like really take a moment to journal about these, write these down, feel them, experience them, close your eyes and be there, smile, hear the giggles, the laughter, push the kid on the swing, whatever it is to you, be there and go back to that place in the evenings. Don't go to that place of guilt, shame. I could have done better. I should have done this. No, go to that place that makes you feel alive, because that gratitude and anxiety cannot exist at the same time. And we've got to repattern ourselves. So then, why am I so passionate about doing this well? Why do I want to be a good mom so bad? That's a deep one, because motive will tell you a lot about what your values are and what your unmet needs are. And that one was a difficult one for me, because at first my answer was, number one, to not be like my mom was, but number two, because I wanted to live up to other people's expectations. And I learned that it wasn't so that my children have a mother to come back to and feel safe. And I had to shift that. And that wasn't something to shame myself for. It was a learning experience. Of course I felt that way. My mom, I mean, look at I grew up in foster care. Of course I felt that way. So allow yourself to feel what this means, and just know that I truly honor you on this journey. And the fact that you showed up for this, the fact that you're listening to this and taking in these questions and being open to a new perspective. Some of the things I shared in here, some people may not agree with, and that's okay. But just being open to new things, and then you can take it or leave it. Like, that is flexibility, and that's going to take you very far in this journey. So I just feel so much gratitude for you being dedicated to this process and seeking out what you feel you need. So thank you. I put here, if we want to see a better reality, we must start creating one, and we show our children what's possible. And when inspiration and creativity run short for us, remember that we can always look to them for guidance. We can always ask them. Okay. Ta-da! I didn't run too much overtime. It's 7:11, just over an hour. Oh gosh, I see I have a chat here. I put, what questions are you left with after these exercises? So, oh gosh, I see the chat. Thank you. I'm in tears. Thank you. You are so welcome. So, so welcome. I really meant it on this slide. Like, I hope this helped in some small way. And please reach out if you would like further support, further discussion, more ideas. I love these perspective shifting prompts and diving deep into things. That's what life is for me. I do this with my kids too, about little mundane things. So I meant it when I said that. Let me see. Oh gosh, let me see if I can stop the share. Okay. Da, 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 da. I think you can still hear me. Um, I guess I'll leave it open for a second and see if anyone has anything they would like to ask, chat, or discuss. You can type it in the chat, or I think you can unmute yourself. And if not, that's totally okay too. I don't want anyone to feel any pressure to talk. Um, but just if you do, I'm here. I know I ran a little over time. I'm sorry. This has been so helpful. Good. I'm so glad. So, so glad. I listened to 12DB School, class 8, about the law of non-resistance, where if people keep saying something, you should probably take that as a nudge and listen. So I've gotten a lot of parenting questions. I'm no master parent, but I have made it through some stuff. It has also brought some things to realization for me. Good, good. That's the first step. I mean, they say like the first step to, what is it? The first step to healing a problem is admitting you have a problem. I believe the first step to change is awareness. So very powerful. So many moms, me, need this. Me too, some days. Some days I still have to like consciously do these things and be like, okay, Ashana, like consciously make the effort. And then some days it comes more natural because I've been doing it and it takes that repetition. I missed the first half. Will we be able to re-listen? Yes, I'm recording. I will upload the recording and it will be on my website, yournorthstarrising.com, and it will be on free stuff. Oh, and Wendy's going to post screenshots to the group. Thank you, Wendy. Good looking out. Okay, that's our Facebook group. It's the North Star Rising community. It's for people who have been through the 12-week program. And I want to mention again the workbook, if anyone chooses to download that. It is at yournorthstarrising.com, and it is under the tab offerings at the top of the screen. If you go to free stuff at the top of the screen, you'll see all of my free offerings. And you can also book a clarity call from there. You guys, you know that you can book one-on-one sessions. Um, and I think that's it. I don't think we have any more chats coming through. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. I hope it helped in some small way. And I'll chat with you guys soon. Bye.